The registration desk clerk stared at the wooden sticks lying on the counter. Her 3 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of confusion among her species. Around them, the Grand Hall of Station High Point buzzed with activity as warriors from across the galaxy prepared for the tournament. "These are your weapons?" she asked again, her voice uncertain. Lyra Osman nodded calmly. She had expected this reaction. The 2 Bakken rested on the counter between them, simple wooden practice swords that her grandfather had carved decades ago. They looked ancient compared to everything else in this place. Behind her, other competitors moved through the registration area. A massive Gravic warrior carried a blade that hummed with contained energy. 2 Saurian fighters compared their vibration weapons, laughing about whose could cut through thicker armor. Everywhere she looked, technology gleamed and pulsed with power. "According to your own rules," Lyra said quietly, "any warrior may bear the arms of their tradition. These are mine." The clerk's fingers moved across her display screen, searching through regulations that nobody had needed to check in centuries. Every competitor brought advanced weapons. That was simply how things were done. The tournament existed to showcase military technology as much as warrior skill. Corporations sponsored fighters to demonstrate their latest innovations. "Technically, you are correct," the clerk finally admitted. "But I must warn you, these will not hold up against modern weapons. Perhaps you should reconsider?" "I appreciate your concern," Lyra replied. "Please complete my registration." Within minutes, news of the human with wooden sword spread through the station. Commentator Whisk, a small furry being who provided live coverage to billions of viewers, practically squealed with delight when the information reached him. "Folks, you will not believe what I just heard." His voice carried across every viewing screen in the amphitheater. "The human representative has registered with wooden training swords. Actual wood. Can you imagine?" Laughter rippled through the crowd of spectators filling the massive arena. Some thought it was a joke. Others assumed the human simply did not understand what she had signed up for. The betting houses immediately posted her odds at 10,000 to 1 against surviving the first round. In the preparation chambers beneath the arena, other fighters watched footage of Lyra's registration on their screens. Most dismissed her immediately. A few felt something like pity. 1 or 2 wondered if there was something they were missing. But those doubts faded quickly when they looked at their own sophisticated equipment. Champion Drax of House Morvain sat in his private chamber, reviewing the tournament bracket. His ionic sword rested against the wall, its containment field creating a faint blue glow in the dim light. He had won 11 tournaments with that blade. 11 times he had stood victorious while crowds chanted his name. When his attendant mentioned the human with wooden swords, Drax barely looked up. "Schedule?" he asked simply. "She faces Kelv the Unbreakable in the first round tomorrow," the attendant replied. Drax nodded and returned to his meditation. Kelv would eliminate her quickly. There was no need to waste time thinking about it. High in the observation galleries, War Scholar Tenneth settled into his seat. The old Cortesian had attended every tournament for the past 40 years, studying combat techniques from across the galaxy. His forearms moved in practiced patterns as he prepared his recording equipment. Something about this human intrigued him. He had read Earth's admission files when they first joined the galactic community. Their planet was classified as a death world, a place where survival required constant adaptation. Yet humans seemed so fragile compared to many other species. Now one of them had entered the most prestigious combat tournament in known space armed with wooden sticks. Either she was foolish beyond measure, or she understood something that everyone else had forgotten. Tenneth decided to watch very carefully. In her assigned quarters, Lyra sat cross-legged on the floor. The room was small but comfortable, designed to accommodate various species. She had declined the offered furniture and created her own space for meditation. Her communicator chimed. A message from her mentor back on Earth appeared on the screen. "I saw the registration feed," the message read. "The whole galaxy is laughing. Remember why you are there. You do not fight to prove that wood is better than plasma. You fight to show them that the warrior matters more than the weapon. Make us proud." Lyra smiled softly and set the device aside. She picked up one of the Bakken and ran her fingers along its smooth surface. Every scratch and mark told a story of training, of lessons learned through repetition and discipline. Tomorrow, Kelv the Unbreakable would enter the ring expecting an easy victory. His vibroblades could cut through starship hulls. His armor could withstand plasma fire. He had won 37 consecutive matches. But Kelv had never fought someone from Earth. He had never faced someone who grew up on a world where everything was dangerous, where survival meant learning to read threats and respond with perfect timing. He had never encountered a fighting philosophy built over thousands of years of human history, refined through countless wars and peacetimes. Lyra set the Bakken down gently and closed her eyes. She focused on her breathing, letting the noise of the station fade away. In her mind, she reviewed techniques passed down through generations. Not flashy moves meant to impress crowds, but practical methods designed to end fights quickly and efficiently. The galaxy could laugh all it wanted. Tomorrow they would begin to understand. Outside her door, station personnel walked past, some still chuckling about the human with wooden swords. In the amphitheater, workers prepared the arena for the opening ceremonies. Across the galaxy, billions of beings settled in to watch what they expected to be entertaining matches between technological equals. None of them knew that everything was about to change. Lyra opened her eyes and stood. She moved through a series of practice forms, her movements precise and controlled. The wooden swords became extensions of her arms, flowing through patterns that were older than spaceflight itself. First blood would be drawn tomorrow, and it would not be hers. Kelv the Unbreakable stretched his massive arms above his head, enjoying the roar of the crowd. His scales gleamed under the arena lights, each one reinforced with a thin layer of defensive coating. The twin vibroblades in his hands hummed with barely contained energy, their edges blurred by molecules moving at impossible speeds. Across the arena floor, Lyra stood quietly with her wooden swords held loosely at her sides. She looked tiny compared to him, almost fragile. The contrast brought fresh waves of laughter from the spectators. "This will be over quickly, folks," commentator Whisk announced from his booth. "Kelv has never lost a first-round match. I honestly do not know what the human was thinking when she signed up for this. Perhaps they will let her withdraw before anyone gets hurt." High Adjudicator Prell raised his forearms to signal the start of the match. The crowd noise faded to an excited murmur. Betting displays showed odds heavily favoring Kelv, with most wagers placed on how many seconds the fight would last. Prell's arms dropped. The match began. Kelv charged immediately, both blades swinging in wide arcs meant to intimidate and overwhelm. His strategy was simple and had always worked before. Hit hard, hit fast, and let superior technology do the rest. The vibroblades could cut through nearly any material known to galactic science. 2 wooden sticks would not even slow them down. Lyra did not move like someone scared. She shifted her weight slightly, turning her body at an angle. When Kelv's first blade came down where her shoulder had been a moment before, she was already somewhere else. The vibroblade passed through empty air with a sharp whine. Kelv stumbled forward, his own momentum carrying him past where he expected resistance. Before he could recover his balance, Lyra moved. Her foot swept behind his ankle, while her shoulder pressed against his center mass. Basic physics took over. The massive Saurine fighter crashed to the arena floor. The crowd gasped. This was not supposed to happen. Kelv rolled quickly and came up swinging. His pride was hurt now, and his attacks became more aggressive. He had size and strength advantages. He had weapons that could cut through anything. This human should have been eliminated already. But Lyra was not where his blades went. She moved in small, efficient steps that somehow kept her just beyond his reach. Her footwork looked simple, almost like dancing, but every movement had purpose. When Kelv swung high, she was low. When he reversed direction, she had already anticipated and adjusted. "What is she doing?" Whisk asked, his voice confused. "She is not even trying to block." "Someone explain this to me." War Scholar Tenneth leaned forward in his seat, all 4 hands gripping the railing. His old eyes tracked every movement with intense focus. He understood what the commentator did not. The human was reading Kelv's intentions before he fully committed to each attack. She saw the shift of weight, the angle of his shoulders, the direction of his eyes. Every action telegraphed the next move to someone trained to see it. Kelv's breathing grew heavier. Fighting in heavy armor was exhausting work, especially against an opponent who refused to stand still. Frustration clouded his judgment. He decided to end this with one massive strike. He raised both vibroblades high above his head and brought them down together with all his strength. The attack was powerful enough to crack the reinforced arena floor. Lyra stepped forward into the attack instead of away from it. The movement seemed suicidal to everyone watching. But as the blades descended, she moved between them, inside Kelv's guard where the weapons could not reach her. Her wooden sword thrust upward in a precise strike to his throat. The impact was not hard enough to seriously injure, but it hit the exact pressure point where Kelv's species was most vulnerable. His automatic shield generator activated in response to the threat, but the system had been calibrated for energy weapons and high-velocity projectiles. The kinetic transfer from wood hitting flesh confused the sensors. The shield flickered, surged, and then failed completely from the unexpected input. Kelv's eyes went wide. He could not breathe. His weapons fell from numb fingers as his hands went to his throat. He dropped to his knees, gasping. Lyra stepped back and lowered her swords. The fight was over. Total elapsed time, 12 seconds. Silence filled the amphitheater. 70,000 spectators sat frozen in disbelief. This was not possible. Technology always won. That was simply how the universe worked. Yet a human with wooden practice swords had just defeated a warrior, armed with weapons that cost more than a small spacecraft. High Adjudicator Prell recovered first. He moved to check on Kelv, who was already starting to breathe normally again. The strike had been perfectly controlled to disable without causing lasting harm. Prell raised one arm to signal the victor. Winner Lyra Osman of Earth. The announcement seemed to break whatever spell held the crowd frozen. Noise erupted from every direction. Some cheered. Many shouted in confusion. Betting houses scrambled to process what had just happened. Commentator Whisk shuffled through his notes frantically. I need to see that again. Can we get a replay? Someone tell me what just happened. The arena screens showed the fight again in slow motion. Viewers could see now what they had missed at full speed. Lyra's movements were not random. Every step had been calculated. She had used Kelv's own strength and momentum against him. The wooden sword had struck with surgical precision at the exact moment when Kelv was most vulnerable and committed to his attack. In the preparation chambers, other fighters stopped what they were doing to watch the replay. Some still dismissed it as luck. Others looked at their own weapons with new uncertainty. Champion Drax watched the footage 3 times before speaking to his attendant. Find me everything we have on human combat training. All of it. War Scholar Tenneth was already recording his observations. His hands moved rapidly across multiple screens as he made notes. Flow state, he muttered to himself. She entered complete flow state. Reading intention rather than reacting to action. This is not luck. This is mastery. Lyra helped Kelv to his feet. The Saurine warrior looked at her with a mix of confusion and grudging respect. No one had ever gotten inside his guard like that. His vibroblades had never even touched her. How? He asked simply. You are strong and your weapons are powerful, Lyra replied. But strength that cannot reach its target is wasted. Speed that moves in predictable patterns can be avoided. Kelv nodded slowly. He picked up his weapons and walked toward the exit. His undefeated first-round record was broken, but he had learned something valuable. Perhaps there was more to combat than having the best equipment. Lyra bowed to the crowd and left the arena. She had 6 more fights to win, and the galaxy was no longer laughing. Pilot Shrax checked his plasma pistols one more time before entering the arena. Unlike Kelv, he had watched Lyra's first match carefully. He was not going to make the same mistakes. The key was obvious: maintain distance. His weapons could fire from across the entire arena floor. The human would never get close enough to use those wooden swords. The betting odds had shifted after Lyra's first victory, but not by much. Most analysts still predicted she would lose in the second round. Kelv had fought stupidly, they said. Shrax was smarter. He specialized in ranged combat and had won 14 tournaments using exactly this strategy. Lyra entered the arena to a very different reception than before. Some spectators actually cheered for her now. Others remained skeptical, waiting to see if she could repeat her earlier performance. War Scholar Tenneth sat in the same seat as before, his recording equipment ready. The match began. Shrax immediately backpedaled, putting maximum distance between himself and Lyra. His first shot came within 2 seconds, a bolt of superheated plasma that could melt through most armor. Lyra was already moving when he pulled the trigger. The shot hit the arena floor where she had been standing, leaving a small crater of scorched material. The human ran in an irregular pattern, never moving in straight lines. Shrax fired again and again, but each shot arrived at empty space. His frustration grew. This should have been simple. Point, shoot, win. Yet somehow this primitive fighter was making him miss. What Shrax did not understand was that Lyra was not dodging his shots. She was dodging his aim. Her eyes stayed locked on his hands and shoulders, reading the micro-movements that preceded each trigger pull. By the time Plasma left the barrel, she was already committed to her new position. Years of training on Earth had taught her this skill. Humanity had spent centuries developing firearms before joining the galactic community. Dodging bullets was considered nearly impossible, so humans learned to predict the shooter instead. The principle worked just as well against plasma weapons. Lyra used every feature of the arena to her advantage. She moved behind obstacles, stayed in motion, and slowly closed the distance. Each sprint brought her a few meters closer. Shrax kept backing up, but the arena wall was behind him. Eventually, he would run out of room. Commentator Whisk provided rapid analysis for the viewers. Shrax is landing 0 shots. How is she reading his aim patterns? Wait, she is getting closer. He needs to move laterally, not just backward. But Shrax was panicking now. His shots became more rapid and less accurate. He had trained to fight opponents who either charged directly or took cover. Lyra did neither. She flowed across the arena floor like water, impossible to pin down. When only 10 meters separated them, Shrax made his fatal mistake. He tried to fire both pistols at once, hoping to cover more area. The split second it took to coordinate both triggers gave Lyra the opening she needed. She burst forward with explosive speed that surprised everyone watching. In 3 running steps, she closed the remaining distance. Her first wooden sword swept up and knocked the pistol from his right hand. The second strike hit his left wrist with enough force to make his fingers spasm open. The plasma pistol clattered to the floor. Shrax tried to activate his personal shield, but Lyra's sword was already pressed against his knee joint. The slightest additional pressure would dislocate it. He raised his hands in surrender. The crowd erupted in genuine cheers this time. Commentator Whisk was practically bouncing in his booth. She did it again. A completely different opponent with a completely different strategy, and she adapted. This human is the real deal. The betting houses scrambled to recalculate odds for the 3rd round. Lyra's chances had improved dramatically. A few wise gamblers started placing money on her going all the way to the finals. In her preparation chamber, Lyra carefully examined her Bakken. The wood showed no significant damage despite striking weapons and armor, designed to withstand modern warfare. Her grandfather had chosen the wood carefully, selecting pieces that had the right density and grain pattern. These swords had been made to last. Her communicator showed hundreds of messages from Earth. Martial arts schools were being flooded with inquiries from alien species wanting to learn human fighting techniques. Her mentor's message stood out among the rest. The galaxy is starting to understand. Show them more. 2 days later, Lyra faced Guardian Prill in the 3rd round. Prill was a defensive specialist who had studied both of Lyra's previous matches. She entered the arena with an energy buckler and a force lance, weapons designed for controlled, patient combat. This fight was different from the start. Prill did not charge or try to maintain distance. She moved carefully, keeping her shield between herself and Lyra at all times. When she attacked with the lance, it was with precise thrusts that she could quickly pull back if Lyra tried to trap the weapon. The match lasted 6 minutes, longer than Lyra's first 2 fights combined. The crowd watched in tense silence as 2 skilled warriors tested each other's defenses. Prill was good, very good. She had learned from watching Lyra's previous victories and adjusted her strategy accordingly. But Lyra was learning too. She studied how Prill held the shield when she shifted her weight, the rhythm of her attacks. Humans were natural pattern recognition machines. Their survival on Earth had depended on seeing threats and opportunities that other creatures missed. The decisive moment came when Prill committed to a thrust with her force lance. Lyra did something that seemed to defy logic. Instead of dodging, she moved toward the attack and trapped the lance against her own body with one Bakken. The lance's energy field crackled against the wood and the Bakken began to crack from the strain, but it held long enough. With her other sword free, Lyra struck at Prill's primary artery, the one weak point not covered by armor. The wooden blade stopped a hair's width from the skin. 1 more centimeter and the fight would end permanently. Prill looked at the sword pressed against her neck, then at Lyra's calm eyes. She released her weapons and raised her hands. "I yield," she said quietly. War Scholar Tenneth stood and applauded, his 4 hands creating a distinctive sound. Around him, other spectators rose to their feet. This was not just a fighter getting lucky. This was a master of combat demonstrating principles that the galaxy had forgotten. In military academies across dozens of worlds, instructors paused their lessons to discuss what they were witnessing. The human was fighting with weapons that should have been obsolete 10,000 years ago, yet she was winning against the best warriors and the finest technology that modern civilization could produce. The lesson was clear to anyone willing to see it. Superior equipment could not compensate for inferior skill. Technology was a tool, not a replacement for training and discipline. As Lyra left the arena, she noticed something had changed. Other fighters no longer looked at her with amusement or pity. Now they watched her with the attention that warriors gave to worthy opponents. Some even nodded in respect as she passed. The semi-finals were next. Only 4 fighters remained, and everyone knew that if Lyra won one more match, she would face champion Drax in the finals. War Master Grant stood in his preparation chamber, watching footage of Lyra's fights for the 20th time. Unlike the earlier opponents who had underestimated her, Grant understood exactly what he was facing. The human was not lucky. She was exceptional. Grant had built his reputation on adaptability. His weapon was a molecularly bonded chainsword that could extend and retract at will, changing from a short blade to a long whip in fractions of a second. He had won 43 matches by constantly varying his reach and attack angles, never letting opponents establish a rhythm. But as he watched Lyra move, he saw something troubling. She adapted even faster than he did. Every opponent had presented different challenges, and she had found solutions within seconds. This would be his hardest fight yet. The semi-final match drew the largest viewing audience in tournament history. Over 200 billion beings across the galaxy tuned in to watch. Earth's population was glued to their screens, entire cities going quiet during the broadcast. When Lyra and Grant entered the arena, the crowd's energy was electric. This was not about watching someone get humiliated anymore. This was genuine championship-level combat between 2 highly skilled warriors. High Adjudicator Prel began the match. Grant attacked immediately, his chainsword extending to maximum length and sweeping horizontally. Lyra ducked under the blade and closed distance. Grant retracted the weapon instantly and thrust at close range. Lyra deflected with one Bakken while stepping offline. The fight became a high-speed chess game. Grant would extend his reach, and Lyra would find ways to get inside his range. When she got close, he would create distance again. Both fighters were breathing hard within the first minute, the mental effort of constant adaptation taking its toll. Commentator Whisk struggled to keep up with the action. "I have never seen anything like this. They are both changing strategies multiple times per second. Every time one fighter seems to gain an advantage, the other adjusts." War scholar Tenneth recorded every movement, his analytical mind working to understand the deeper patterns. What he witnessed was 2 completely different philosophies of combat colliding. Grant represented the galactic approach, use superior technology and tactical variation. Lyra embodied the human method, make the warrior more important than the weapon. 5 minutes into the match, both fighters showed signs of exhaustion. Sweat dripped from Lyra's face. Grant's movements were becoming fractionally slower, but neither gave ground. The crowd watched in complete silence, afraid to miss even a single exchange. Grant decided to force a conclusion. He extended his chainsword to full length and began a complex pattern of attacks, the blade whipping through the air from multiple angles in rapid succession. It was his signature move, the technique that had won him countless victories. Lyra had no choice but to defend. Her Bakken moved in precise arcs, deflecting and redirecting the chainsword. But Grant's weapon was too versatile. One of his strikes came from an unexpected angle and connected solidly with her left-hand Bakken. The wooden sword shattered, pieces of it scattered across the arena floor. The crowd gasped. Lyra was down to one weapon against an opponent who was perfectly fresh. The match seemed decided, but Lyra's expression did not change. She shifted her grip on the remaining Bakken and adjusted her stance. Her movements changed subtly, adapting to the new reality of fighting with one sword instead of 2. Grant pressed his advantage, sensing victory. His chainsword attacks became more aggressive, but something unexpected began happening. Without, the second sword to worry about, Lyra's defense became even more efficient. She could focus all her attention on a single line of movement, and her other hand was now free. The next time Grent's chainsword extended toward her, Lyra did not just deflect it with her bakken. Her free hand shot out and grabbed the chain itself. The molecularly bonded links were designed to cut, but her grip was at a neutral point between segments. The weapon's momentum carried it around her wrist. Before Grent could retract, Lyra pulled hard while stepping forward. Grent had three choices: let go of his weapon, resist and be pulled off balance, or follow the pull in close distance. All three options were bad. He chose to resist. His superior strength let him hold on to the weapon, but the sudden opposing force disrupted his footwork. For just a moment, his weight was distributed wrong. Lyra released the chain and struck. Her remaining bakken connected with Grent's temple in a controlled blow. Not hard enough to cause serious injury, but sufficient to rattle his brain. His vision blurred. His legs wobbled. The chainsword fell from his numb fingers. Grent dropped to one knee, trying to clear his head. By the time his vision returned to normal, Lyra's wooden sword was touching his throat. "Yield," she said simply. Grent looked up at her, saw the respect in her eyes, and nodded. "I yield." The arena exploded with noise. Beings from hundreds of species cheered and stamped and made whatever sounds their biology allowed for celebration. This was the best match the tournament had seen in decades. High Adjudicator Prell raised Lyra's hand in victory. She had made it to the finals. She would face champion Drax. In his private chamber, Drax turned off the viewing screen. He had seen enough. The human was everything the reports suggested and more. She did not just fight well. She thought differently than any opponent he had ever faced. For the first time in 11 tournaments, Drax felt something he had not experienced in years. Not fear exactly, but a deep uncertainty. His ionic sword and shield generator were the finest weapons his civilization could create. He had trained with them for most of his life. But were they enough? He stood and moved to his equipment storage. Behind his primary weapons, wrapped in plain cloth, was something he had kept from his youth. A simple metal blade with no power source, no enhancements, no technology. His training sword from when he first learned combat. Drax had not touched it in 15 years. But now he pulled it from storage and felt its familiar weight. For 3 days before the final match, he had time to prepare. He would need to use it wisely. Across the galaxy, military commanders discussed what they were witnessing. Human combat. Instructors received thousands of requests for training programs. Earth's diplomatic status shifted subtly as other species realized that humanity brought valuable knowledge to galactic civilization. War scholar Tenneth published his first analysis. The human fighter demonstrates a fundamental truth we have forgotten. Technology serves the warrior. The warrior does not serve technology. When we reversed that relationship, we became dependent on our tools rather than masters of them. The essay spread through military academies faster than any official doctrine had in centuries. Young cadets began questioning their training programs. Instructors found themselves defending teaching methods that suddenly seemed inadequate. In her quarters, Lyra sat quietly with her remaining bakken. She had not expected to lose one of her swords in the semi-finals. But her grandfather had made 3 sets anticipating that wood might break under stress. She retrieved the backup pair from her equipment case. These bakken were slightly different from the first set. Darker wood, different grain pattern, but they felt right in her hands. Familiar and balanced. 3 days until the final match. 3 days to prepare for the greatest warrior the galaxy had produced in a generation. Champion Drax had never lost a tournament final. His record was perfect. But then again, Lyra thought. With a slight smile, everyone had perfect records until someone beat them. She began her practice forms, moving through techniques that were older than space travel itself. Simple, direct, effective. The wooden swords flowed through the air with practiced precision. The finals were coming, and the whole galaxy would be watching. The amphitheater was packed beyond its designed capacity. Station security had to turn away thousands of beings who wanted to watch the final match in person. Viewing screens across the galaxy showed the same image. An arena floor waiting for 2 fighters to make history. Lyra entered first, carrying her wooden bokken with the same quiet confidence she had shown in every previous match. The crowd's cheers were deafening. She had gone from being a joke to a folk hero in just over a week. Billions of beings were now invested in her success. Then champion Drax entered, and the noise somehow grew even louder. The massive Gravik warrior moved with the assured grace of someone who had never known defeat in this arena. His ionic sword hung at his side, its blue containment field casting strange shadows. His personal shield generator was active, creating a faint shimmer around his body. But something was different. Across his back, visible to everyone, Drax carried a second weapon wrapped in simple cloth. The crowd murmured in confusion. Champions never brought backup weapons. It was seen as a sign of uncertainty. High Adjudicator Prell stepped onto the arena floor to address the spectators. "Today we witness history," he announced, his voice amplified across the amphitheater. "The finest warrior our galaxy has produced in a generation faces a challenger who has reminded us of truths we had forgotten. May this match be worthy of both fighters." Prell raised his forearms. The crowd fell silent. Then his arms dropped and the final match began. Drax did not charge like Kelv had. He approached carefully, his ionic sword held in a ready position. The blade hummed with contained power, capable of cutting through almost any substance known to science. His shield generator flickered slightly as it maintained its protective field. Lyra moved to meet him, her wooden swords angled defensively. This was the moment she had prepared for. Every previous opponent had taught her something. Every fight had been a lesson leading to this one. They circled each other slowly, taking measure. Drax struck first, a testing cut that Lyra had to dodge rather than block. The ionic blade would slice through her bokken like they were made of smoke. She could not meet his weapon directly. The shield generator created additional problems. Every time Lyra got within striking range, the shield pushed her back with invisible force. It was designed to stop weapons from reaching the body, and it worked perfectly against her wooden swords. For the first time in the tournament, Lyra looked overmatched. Drax pressed his advantage, his attacks controlled but relentless. The ionic sword cut through the air with terrible purpose. Lyra had to remain in constant motion, using every bit of the arena floor to stay ahead of the blade. Commentator Whisk's voice was tense. "Drax is dominating this match." The human's wooden swords are useless against his ionic blade, and that shield generator keeps her from getting close enough to use her technique. "I do not see how she can win this." War Scholar Tenneth watched with troubled eyes. He understood the problem. Lyra's advantage had always been her ability to get inside an opponent's guard and use precision strikes against vulnerable points. But Drax's shield made that impossible. She was fighting not just a skilled warrior, but technology specifically designed to counter her methods. 5 minutes passed. 10. Lyra showed no signs of panic, but she was clearly losing. Every exchange left her in a worse position. The crowd began to sense that this might be where her remarkable run ended. Then Drax did something that shocked everyone watching. He deactivated his shield generator. The protective shimmer around his body faded. He reached back and drew the cloth-wrapped weapon from his back. With deliberate movements, he removed the wrapping to reveal a simple metal blade. No power source, no enhancements, just steel shaped for combat. He sheathed his ionic sword and raised the plain metal blade. The crowd erupted in confused noise. What was he doing? "I wanted to understand," Drax announced, his voice carrying across the arena. "For 3 days I trained as you train, human, with simple steel and nothing else. I do not know if I learned enough. But I know that facing you with advantages you cannot match teaches me nothing of value." The gesture stunned everyone. A champion abandoning his advantages in the final match. It seemed like madness. Yet Drax's expression showed no doubt. He had made his decision. Lyra bowed deeply to him, a sign of profound respect. Then she raised her bokken. Now the fight would be what it should have been from the start. Skill against skill. Warrior against warrior. They met in the center of the arena. The battle that followed was unlike anything the tournament had ever seen. Without his technological advantages, Drax relied on raw power and technique. He was larger, stronger, and had reach advantage with his metal blade. But Lyra moved with the precision that came from decades of dedicated practice. They exchanged dozens of strikes, neither gaining clear advantage. Drax's blade rang against her wooden swords, and incredibly, the wood held. Every impact sent vibrations through both fighters' arms. Every exchange demanded split-second decisions. The crowd watched in absolute silence. This was combat in its purest form. Two highly skilled warriors testing themselves against each other with nothing but their ability and training. There were no special effects, no technology to create artificial advantages. Just speed, timing, and the application of technique. Both fighters began showing fatigue. Sweat poured down their faces. Their breathing became labored, but neither gave ground. Neither asked for pause. They had both trained their entire lives for moments like this. Drax executed a powerful overhead strike, committing his full strength to the blow. It was the same type of attack that Kelv had tried in the first round, but performed with much greater skill and control. Lyra made her choice. She did not dodge. She stepped forward into the attack, both Bakken raised and crossed to catch the descending blade. The metal swords struck the wooden swords with tremendous force. The Bakken cracked. Splinters flew, but they held just long enough to trap Drax's blade between them. With his weapon caught, Drax was vulnerable for a fraction of a second. Lyra released one hand from her trapped Bakken and delivered a palm strike to his chest, not to injure but to disrupt his balance. Drax staggered backward. Lyra swept his front leg. The massive warrior fell, his blade clattering away. Before he could recover, Lyra's cracked Bakken touched his throat. The wood was barely holding together, but it was enough. For several heartbeats, neither moved. Then Drax smiled and placed his hand on the ground in the traditional gesture of yield. The amphitheater exploded with sound. Lyra extended her hand to Drax. The former champion took it and pulled himself to his feet. They stood facing each other in the center of the arena, both breathing hard, both marked by the intensity of their fight. Then, in a gesture that transcended language and species, they bowed deeply to each other. The crowd's cheering reached levels that threatened the station's structural integrity. Beings from hundreds of worlds celebrated what they had witnessed. Not just a tournament victory, but something more fundamental, a reminder of what combat truly meant. High Adjudicator Prell approached with the champion's mark, a crystalline symbol that had been awarded to tournament victors for 3,000 years. His forehands trembled slightly as he presented it to Lyra. "You have done something remarkable," Prell said quietly. His words meant only for her. "You have won a tournament. But more than that, you have taught us a lesson we desperately needed to learn. Accept this with our gratitude." Lyra took the champion's mark and raised it high. The crowd's response shook the very foundations of the amphitheater. But the moment that would be remembered longest came next. Drax raised his hand for silence, and gradually the noise subsided. The crowd wanted to hear what the legendary warrior would say. "I have won 11 tournaments," Drax began, his voice carrying to every corner of the space. "I won them with the finest weapons my civilization could create. With technology that cost fortunes to develop. I stood here 11 times and accepted victory as my due." He paused, looking at Lyra with unmistakable respect. "Today I learned something that shames me. I had forgotten how to truly fight. I had become dependent on advantages that made me feel powerful but actually made me weaker. This human, with weapons carved from wood, has shown me what I lost." Drax turned to address the entire amphitheater. "She has shown all of us what we lost. We built better and better tools and told ourselves that made us better warriors. But we were wrong. The warrior must be strong. The tools are merely extensions of that strength. When we reversed that understanding, we diminished ourselves." The silence that followed his words was profound. Across the galaxy, billions of beings heard a champion admit that he had been fighting the wrong way, that they had all been thinking about combat incorrectly. "I asked Lyra Osman of Earth to train me," Drax continued, "to teach me the principles that make a warrior truly formidable. Not the tricks of technology, but the foundations of skill." The request sent shockwaves through every military establishment in known space. If Champion Drax acknowledged that human combat training was superior to galactic methods, then everything needed to be reconsidered. Lyra smiled and nodded. "I would be honored." The celebration that followed lasted for 3 days, but even while Station High Point partied, the real work was beginning elsewhere. Military academies across hundreds of worlds requested human combat instructors. Martial arts masters from Earth found themselves invited to teach on planets they had never heard of. War scholar Tenneth published his comprehensive analysis, a document that would be required reading in military schools for generations. He called it the Death Worlder's Wisdom, and his central thesis was simple. Humanity's harsh homeworld had forced them to develop adaptability and skill that more comfortable species had never needed. Earth is classified as a death world, he wrote. Nearly everything on that planet can kill a human. They have predators, diseases, environmental hazards, and even their own species to fear. Survival required them to become exceptional problem solvers and fighters. They could not rely on being the strongest or fastest or most armored. They had to be clever, adaptable, and precise. These traits, refined over millions of years of evolution, make them formidable warriors regardless of their tools. The essay spread through galactic networks faster than any academic work in history. It sparked debates in every military organization. Traditional training methods were questioned. Equipment procurement budgets were reconsidered. The entire philosophy of galactic warfare began to shift. 3 weeks after the tournament, Lyra returned to Earth. She could have stayed on Station High Point, accepting wealth and prestige beyond measure. Dozens of corporations offered her contracts. Planets invited her to establish training centers. She declined everything. Instead, she returned to her small dojo in a quiet neighborhood. The building was old and modest, with wooden floors worn smooth by generations of students. This was where she belonged, but now her dojo had a waiting list that stretched for months. Among the humans who wanted to learn were beings from across the galaxy. A young Gravic warrior practiced forms beside a human teenager. A Saurian diplomat learned footwork from a retired soldier. A Cartesian scholar studied the philosophy behind the techniques. Lyra watched them train and felt satisfied. She had not fought to prove that humans were superior. She had fought to share what humanity had learned through hard experience. The galaxy was listening now, and that was worth more than any trophy. Champion Drax kept his word. He traveled to Earth and spent 6 months training at Lyra's dojo. The sight of the galaxy's most famous warrior performing basic exercises alongside beginners created media sensation after media sensation. But Drax ignored the attention and focused on learning. When he finally returned to his homeworld, he carried no advanced weapons. Just a simple wooden bokken that Lyra had given him. He established his own training center, teaching what he had learned. Within a year, thousands of warriors were studying human combat principles. The changes spread slowly but inevitably. Military forces began emphasizing skill development alongside technology training. Weapon manufacturers found themselves forced to create equipment that enhanced warrior ability, rather than replaced it. The entire relationship between fighter and tool shifted back toward balance. 5 years after the tournament, war scholar Tenneth visited Lyra's dojo. He found her teaching a class of mixed-species students, all of them, working through the same fundamental techniques. "You changed everything," he told her during a quiet moment after class. "The entire galaxy thinks differently about combat now, about skill versus technology, about what makes someone truly formidable." Lyra smiled and gestured to her students. "I did not change anything. I just reminded people of truths that have always existed. Every species has warriors. Every culture has martial traditions. We all just forgot to honor them properly." She picked up one of her bokken, the same pair she had carried into the tournament finals. They were scarred and worn now, bearing the marks of 5 years of constant teaching, but they remained strong and functional. "These were carved by my grandfather," she said. "He learned from his teacher, who learned from hers, going back centuries. The wood is nothing special. The shape is simple, but they carry the wisdom of everyone who held them and learned from them. That is what I shared with the galaxy. Not human superiority, but human experience." Tenneth nodded slowly. "And the galaxy is better for it." In orbit above Earth, new students arrived daily to study at various martial arts schools. The planet that had once been dismissed as primitive was now recognized as having valuable knowledge. Humanity's status in galactic civilization rose not through military might or technological innovation, but through the simple act of sharing what they knew. In dojos and training halls across hundreds of worlds, warriors practiced with wooden swords alongside plasma blades. They learned that both had value. Technology provided capability, but skill provided mastery. The best warriors learned to combine both. Lyra continued teaching in her small dojo, content with knowing that she had given the galaxy something worth having. Not victory in a tournament, but a lesson about what made someone truly strong. The warrior matters more than the weapon. That truth, once remembered, would never be forgotten again. And sometimes, late at night when the dojo was quiet, she would hold her grandfather's bakken and remember the moment she stepped into that arena. While 70,000 beings laughed, she had walked in with wooden swords and walked out with the galaxy's respect, not because wood was better than technology, but because she had been ready to prove what really mattered. The warrior. Always the warrior.